Why was everyone staring at her? Maybe it was the tattoo, or maybe it was the way she carried herself, calm, controlled, like someone who'd already seen what fear really looked like. The cafeteria smelled like powdered eggs and burnt coffee. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, humming like restless insects. In the far corner, a group of Navy SEALs laughed, loud and sharp, their voices slicing through the morning stillness. The kind of laughter that wasn't joy, it was a weapon. "Nice prison art, sweetheart," one of them said, his chair creaking as he leaned back. "Trying to look tough with that ridiculous snake tattoo." Elena Carter didn't look up. Her hand tightened around the metal tray, knuckles whitening, but her eyes stayed on the food she wasn't eating. She didn't give them what they wanted. Not anger, not shame, not even a flinch. Across the room, someone else noticed. General Howard Morrison, seated half in shadow, his coffee untouched, his expression unreadable. He'd been watching her for days, watching the small habits, the quiet discipline, the tension that never left her shoulders. He didn't intervene, not yet. If you've ever been mocked for something others didn't understand, you'll understand her silence. The kind of silence that comes from years of learning that dignity doesn't argue, it endures. Outside, the Nevada desert was still dark. 5:30 a.m. the base slept, but Elena didn't. She sat on the edge of her narrow bunk, lacing her running shoes with precise, practiced movements. Double knot, pull tight, check twice. The same routine every morning, like a ritual carved into her bones. She ran the perimeter before dawn, 5 kilometers around the fence line, her breathing steady, her pace exact. Her fitness tracker blinked softly, 56 beats per minute. That wasn't a civilian's rhythm. That was something trained, disciplined, conditioned. At 06:30, when the cafeteria reopened, she was already there again, hair tied back, uniform crisp, every movement deliberate. She took her usual seat, back to the wall, facing both the entrance and the kitchen. To most, it looked like paranoia. To anyone who knew, it looked like survival. Her phone sat on the table at a perfect 45-degree angle, its black screen reflecting the blind spot behind her shoulder. Every 12 seconds, her eyes flicked to it. Checking. Always checking. You don't unlearn vigilance. Not when you've lived where shadows move faster than gunfire. In the storage depot, where she was assigned as a logistics worker, the others saw only a quiet woman who moved like she didn't belong. Captain James Dorsey saw her as a civilian intrusion, a paper pusher pretending to wear a soldier's skin. He didn't notice the details, the way she tied her boots, the way she scanned exits, the small, invisible calculations happening behind her eyes. "Civilians in uniform," he muttered as he passed. "Nothing but dressed-up janitors." 3 young Marines, eager to impress, deliberately knocked a crate of ammunition from the shelf. The wooden box crashed open, cartridges rolling across the concrete like spilled marbles. They expected her to flinch, to complain, to break. Instead, she crouched silently and began collecting each round. Calm, unshaken, but what made the room still was how she sorted them by touch, by sound, by instinct. 9 5.56 NATO, 7.62. No hesitation, no counting, just memory. One of the Marines chuckled nervously. Well, at least the janitor knows her bullets. But an older sergeant standing by the loading dock didn't laugh. His brow furrowed. That wasn't casual knowledge. That was training, real training. By afternoon, whispers had started. About the tattoo, about the scars that looked like stars beneath it. Private Williams, loud and careless, called across the warehouse. "Hey, Carter, that snake-eating itself thing, what's that supposed to be? A cult? Or maybe prison art after all?" Elena didn't answer. Her eyes stayed distant, her tone flat. She turned and walked away. The laughter followed her like smoke. But one senior officer passing through froze mid-step. His eyes had caught the mark. Recognition flickered across his face, then fear. He turned sharply and left without a word. By the next morning, Captain Dorsey decided to make his point. The firing range baked under the desert sun. Heat shimmered off the sand. Soldiers gathered to train, but he had a different purpose. "Carter," he barked, tossing her an M4. "Let's see what the supply girl can do." The laughter returned, quiet but sharp. She didn't argue, didn't protest. She stepped to the line, adjusted the sights in 3 seconds, and switched the rifle to her left shoulder. Wrong stance, backward stance, every manual said so. Then 5 shots cracked through the morning air. When the target came back, the range fell silent. 1 hole, not 5, 1. A sniper on the far end of the line whispered, "That's not luck." Captain Dorsey's jaw clenched, his face flushed. She humiliated him without saying a word. Later that day, during pistol training, a new recruit fumbled his weapon. The barrel swung dangerously toward the group. 4 seconds, that's all there was. Elena moved before anyone else could even shout. She was there, hand locking the recruit's wrist, redirecting the muzzle, clearing the chamber, ejecting the magazine, all in one motion. The shot never came. The silence afterward was deafening. Captain Dorsey's voice cut through it, sharp and accusing. "Where exactly did you learn close-quarters weapon disarmament, Carter? That's not in the warehouse manual." "Just lucky reflexes, sir," she said evenly. But the flicker in her eyes told a different story. Reflexes aren't luck. Reflexes are memory. That night, a young lieutenant named Marcus Ramirez, bored with system maintenance, opened her personnel file. He expected standard civilian entries. Instead, he found 4 years missing, 2016 to 2020, nothing but a void. And her clearance level, not secret, not top secret. It said provisional, a clearance only granted under exceptional authority. Then a message pinged across his terminal, encrypted, untraceable. 7 words. 7 stars compromised, silence protocol active. He froze. He shouldn't even know that phrase existed. He closed the file, deleted the logs, and made a silent promise. Whatever she was, he would pretend he never knew. The next morning, the cafeteria buzzed again with rumors. Williams was louder now, braver in the presence of laughter. "I looked it up. That snake symbol, it's some ancient myth crap. She probably thinks she's some kind of warrior goddess." Laughter again, cruel, thoughtless. Elena's fork stopped midair. Her hand trembled just once before she forced it still. Her pulse raced, but her face stayed calm. Across the room, the general watched again. The same shadowed corner, the same silence. He didn't move, but his eyes, they burned. He'd seen this before, the arrogance, the ignorance, and the cost that followed. That night the wind howled across the desert. The lights of the base flickered against the dark horizon. Elena sat alone on her bunk, a small black and white photo in her hands, a team of 7, faces blurred, a memory she could never speak of. She traced the stars tattooed beneath the serpent on her arm, 3 of them, faded now, like the name she whispered when no one was listening. The door creaked open, a shadow filled the frame, General Morrison. "You shouldn't hide what you've earned," he said quietly. Her eyes lifted, steady but cold. "Some things aren't meant to be remembered, sir." He nodded slowly. "Maybe, but some things are meant to be seen, especially by those who forget what real sacrifice looks like." He left without another word, and she sat there long after, the wind outside whispering through the vents like ghosts. If you've ever felt invisible, like your strength had to live behind silence, you'd recognize her too. Because sometimes the bravest people aren't the ones who shout the loudest. They're the ones who have learned when not to speak. How far could silence go before it became a weapon? By the 3rd morning, the air on base felt heavier, thicker somehow. You could sense it in the way people looked at her. The smirks weren't jokes anymore. They were curiosity sharpened into suspicion. Whispers carried faster than orders, and Elena Carter's name had become something soldiers said half under their breath, as if speaking it too loudly might reveal something they didn't understand. Even Captain Dorsey could feel it. He'd built this narrative, this quiet campaign against her, and now it had grown legs of its own. Every rumor he'd started came back amplified. Every whisper became an accusation. And that was fine by him. He wanted it, needed it. Because deep down, her calm frightened him. It wasn't the kind of calm you find in ordinary people. It was the kind that came from someone who'd been in storms you couldn't imagine. The kind that didn't crack even when mocked or tested or pushed. And men like Dorsey, men who commanded through noise, feared quiet power more than they feared bullets. That morning, a dust storm had blown in from the desert, tinting everything in muted orange. The flag outside the mess hall whipped in the wind, its edges frayed from months of sun. Inside, the laughter was gone, replaced with tension you could taste. Private Williams sat slouched at a table, eyes darting nervously toward her. Even he wasn't laughing anymore. He'd seen what she did at the range. The memory of that perfect single-hole grouping lingered in his mind like an echo he couldn't shake. Dorsey entered, boots loud against the tile. His voice, however, was low, almost conspiratorial. "Carter," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "you'll be reporting to the main briefing room at 900. Bring your identification and service documents." Heads turned, forks paused midair. Elena met his gaze, her face unreadable. "Yes, sir." She finished her meal, wiped the table with methodical precision, and stood. There was no argument, no hesitation, just quiet acceptance, the kind that unnerved people who expected submission or anger. Behind her, murmurs filled the silence she left behind. The briefing room was colder than usual. The air conditioning hummed at a constant drone, and the overhead lights cast long, sterile shadows across rows of soldiers standing at attention. 50 of them, all confused, all summoned for reasons none understood. Dorsey stood at the front, chest puffed, self-importance radiating from him like heat. He'd been waiting for this. He could feel the moment building, the chance to expose her, to humiliate her, to prove himself right. "We have a critical security concern," he announced, his voice echoing through the hall. "Someone in this unit has falsified credentials, has lied about their qualifications, and is potentially compromising our operational integrity." The murmurs began at once. Soldiers exchanged glances, confusion bleeding into fear. And then Dorsey pointed. "Carter, front and center." The words hit like a gunshot. Elena rose from the back row without hesitation. Every eye followed her as she walked through the crowd, head high, shoulders squared. The silence stretched, long, uncomfortable. Even now, even under suspicion, she moved with the same deliberate control that made them all uneasy. When she reached the front, Dorsey gestured sharply. 2 military police officers stepped forward, not grabbing her, just flanking her, close enough to make a point. "Identification," Dorsey said. She handed it over without a word. He pretended to study it. Everyone could see he wasn't really reading anything. He was performing, turning this into theater. "Logistics specialist, civilian contractor," he said loudly. "Funny, you seem to know an awful lot about weapons for someone who's supposed to count boxes." No one laughed. "I've seen your file," he continued. "And you know what's interesting? There are 4 years missing. 4 whole years of your life that don't exist. No employment, no record, no explanation." He leaned closer, voice low, dangerous. "So tell me, Carter, what exactly were you doing between 2016 and 2020? She met his eyes, calm, measured. "That information is classified." Dorsey smiled a predator's smile. "Classified," he repeated mockingly, "for a warehouse clerk." He turned to the room, spreading his arms theatrically. "See, that's the problem. She's hiding something. And until we know what that is, she's a liability." The soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Even those who'd mocked her before weren't sure anymore. Something about this didn't feel right. But Dorsey didn't care. He wanted a confession. "You forged something," he said, packing now. "Training documents, perhaps. Maybe you're using stolen credentials. Or maybe you're just a fraud who wanted to play soldier until someone noticed." "I've never forged anything," Elena said quietly. He slammed his hand against the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "Then what are you, Carter?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Then the door opened. General Howard Morrison entered. The room snapped to attention in an instant. Even Dorsey straightened so fast his chair nearly toppled. Morrison didn't say a word at first. He just stood there, letting his presence fill the room. 2 silver stars on his shoulders, 40 years of service in his eyes. "At ease," he said finally. His voice was soft but heavy like distant thunder. Dorsey cleared his throat. "Sir, I was just conducting a—" "At ease, Captain," Morrison repeated, his tone colder now. Dorsey stopped talking. The general's eyes shifted to Elena. For a long moment he didn't speak. He simply looked at her, really looked at her. Recognition flickered behind his gaze. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, steady. "This woman," he said, "is not your concern." Dorsey blinked, confused. "Sir, with all due respect, her record—" "Is not for you to read," Morrison interrupted. He stepped closer, unbuttoning his right cuff. Slowly, deliberately, he rolled up his sleeve, past the wrist, past the forearm, the fabric bunched at his elbow. Gasps rippled through the room. There, inked into his weathered skin, was the same mark, the same serpent eating its tail. The same Ouroboros. But beneath his, there were 7 small stars. Dorsey went pale. His mouth opened, then closed, words dying in his throat. Morrison's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "This mark is not bought in a parlor. It is not drawn for decoration. It is earned. Through blood, through sacrifice, through operations that will never appear in any official record." His eyes swept the room. "This symbol represents a unit that doesn't exist. Ghost Unit 7. Its members served in the shadows, saved lives no one will ever count, fought battles no one will ever hear about." He turned to Elena. "And she," he said softly, "earned hers long before any of you ever touched a rifle." No one moved, no one breathed. Even Dorsey seemed to shrink beneath the weight of it. Elena didn't speak. She didn't gloat. She simply stood there, the same calm she'd always carried now transformed into something else, something everyone could finally see. "Permission to return to duty, sir," she said quietly. "Granted, soldier," Morrison replied. When she passed Dorsey on her way out, she didn't look at him. She didn't need to. Her silence was heavier than any accusation could ever be. The predator had become the prey. An hour later, the base theater was full. Every seat, every aisle, every wall lined with soldiers who'd heard what happened. General Morrison stood at the podium, back straight, hands clasped behind him. His face was carved from stone. "Many of you don't know what a ghost unit is," he began. "That's by design." The lights dimmed. The projector flickered to life, casting grainy night vision footage onto the screen. "Syria 2017, Morrison said quietly. "A compound under siege, hostages inside, no support, no extraction, no official acknowledgment." The footage showed chaos, gunfire, smoke, bodies moving through darkness. Then a figure appeared, small, fast, controlled. A woman carrying a child while firing with her free hand. "Elena Carter," Morrison said. "Ghost Unit 7, 12 countries, 43 civilians saved that night, 0 American casualties." The silence in the theater was absolute. Morrison turned from the screen. His eyes swept across the crowd. While politicians gave speeches, these people disappeared. While others took credit, they were erased. Their victories never recorded, their sacrifices never spoken. He paused. "So the next time you think you understand someone by the uniform they wear, or by the tattoo on their arm, remember this moment. He looked at Dorsey, whose face was pale, jaw tight. Remember that you don't know their story. You don't know their scars. You don't know their ghosts. He stepped back from the podium, dismissed. The crowd stayed silent. No applause, no words, just quiet respect, the kind that doesn't need to be taught. As the lights came back on, Elena sat alone in the last row. The footage still flickered faintly against her face. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were distant, reflecting the ghosts of people whose names she still whispered at night. The ones she couldn't save. The ones no one would ever know existed. Outside, the desert wind carried the faintest sound of the flag snapping in the dark, like a heartbeat. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself to breathe. But peace never lasts long for people like her. Because in the shadows, something had already begun to stir again. How do you honor ghosts when no one is allowed to admit they ever existed? 2 days after the theater briefing, the base looked different. Same desert horizon, same sunburnt walls, same soldiers marching in tight formation, but the silence had changed. It wasn't the quiet of routine anymore. It was the quiet that follows realization. People looked at Elena differently now, not with mockery, not even with curiosity, with caution, respect, guilt. No one dared to speak of the footage they'd seen, the classified mission in Syria that officially never happened. But in the cafeteria, in the hangars, in the endless corridors of the Nevada base, her name moved through whispers anyway. Elena Carter, Ghost Unit 7. The woman who wasn't supposed to exist. The ceremonial hall was brighter than usual that morning. Flags hung at half-mast. The air smelled faintly of polish and sweat, that sterile scent of discipline and formality. Soldiers filled the rows, their dress uniforms pressed to perfection, their boots shining under the spotlights. On the stage stood General Morrison, his uniform heavier today, the weight of medals, of memory, of loss. Beside him, Elena stood motionless in her own dress uniform, the same serpent tattoo visible just below her cuff. It wasn't covered this time. For the first time since she arrived at the base, she wasn't trying to blend in. Morrison's voice carried across the hall like a prayer spoken over graves. By authority vested in me by the Department of Defense and under the seal of the United States government. He paused, the weight of his words hanging in the air. For extraordinary valor in service to this nation, for actions beyond the call of duty, for sacrifice that will never be officially recognized, Elena Carter, I present this commendation. He pinned a medal to her chest, a medal that, by protocol, could never exist in any record. No applause, just silence deep and reverent. Her eyes glistened. She didn't blink, she didn't speak. Because she wasn't crying for herself. Morrison's voice softened. This is not only for her, he said. It is for those who cannot stand here beside her. He stepped closer to the microphone. The hall seemed to shrink around him. For Sergeant Marcus Webb, who died holding a door so 16 civilians could escape. For Lieutenant Sarah Chen, who took a bullet meant for an ambassador's daughter. For Corporal David Okonkwo, who stayed behind to disarm explosives so the rest could make it out alive. He swallowed hard. For every member of Ghost Unit 7 who fell so others could live, who rest in unmarked graves, whose names will never appear in history books. Elena's lips trembled. She tried not to, but the tears came anyway. And no one, not even the hardest Marine in the room, thought less of her for it. When the ceremony ended, Morrison didn't dismiss them immediately. He just stood in silence beside her, watching the flag sway faintly in the air-conditioned breeze. Then quietly he said, "You carried them farther than most people carry themselves, soldier." She nodded once. "They carried me first, sir." Outside, the entire base had formed up in the courtyard. The same soldiers who once mocked her now standing in absolute silence. Captain James Dorsey was at the front, face pale, posture stiff. His rank hadn't saved him from the consequences. He stepped forward when Morrison signaled, his voice raw, unsteady. I made a grave error in judgment. No one interrupted, no one moved. I mocked a decorated service member, he continued. I conducted an unauthorized investigation based on assumption and pride. I disrespected the uniform I wear and the values I swore to uphold. He turned toward her, his jaw tightened. Elena Carter, I offer my sincerest apology. She could have ignored him. She could have humiliated him. She could have turned her back and walked away. Instead, she stood straight, eyes calm, voice clear. Apology accepted, Captain. She didn't do it for him. She did it for the next one, the next invisible warrior who'd one day walk into a room full of laughter and judgment. The next ghost who didn't deserve to be forgotten. The formation was dismissed, but for a long time afterward no one left. They just stood there, watching her walk away, feeling the quiet weight of shame and admiration settle into their bones. That night the base was unusually still. Elena sat in her quarters, the lights dim, the metal on her desk catching faint reflections from the corridor. Her hands traced its edge without really touching it. It wasn't pride she felt, it was memory. Each touch reminded her of someone who never came back. She opened the drawer beside her bed. Inside was a folded photograph, 7 figures standing shoulder to shoulder, blurred faces, desert night. The edges burned slightly from fire. 7 stars. Her breath caught as she unfolded it. She touched 3 of the faces, the ones gone forever. A knock broke the silence. "Come in," she said. Lieutenant Ramirez entered, his expression uncertain. He wasn't supposed to be there, but something in his eyes told her this wasn't about protocol. "Sir," he said, addressing the general behind her, because Morrison was already there, standing quietly near the window, his shadow long against the wall. "We've intercepted another encrypted message." Ramirez hesitated. "Same channel as before, same signature." Morrison turned slowly. "Show me." Ramirez handed over the printed strip. The paper trembled slightly in his hands. 7 words again. "If 1 star rises again, 2 will fall." The room fell dead silent. Morrison's jaw tightened. The lines on his face seemed deeper suddenly, carved by something heavier than age. "Where did it come from?" Elena asked quietly. "Unknown. Routed through military-grade encryption, but from outside the network. Could be foreign intelligence. Could be domestic. Could be anyone with clearance deep enough to bury a signal under 5 layers of ghost code." Morrison set the paper down carefully. The red warning light from the comm system blinked in the corner, bathing the room in a dull crimson glow. "They know," he murmured. Elena looked up. "Who?" "The same people who buried Ghost Unit 7, he said. "The same people who ordered silence after Syria. The ones who built the shadows we worked in." He turned toward her. "They know you're active again, and they don't want you visible." Elena's pulse steadied. The same calm she'd carried into every firefight returned. "How long do we have?" "Not long enough." A low hum filled the air, the sound of backup generators kicking in. The power flickered once, twice, before stabilizing. The base plunged into emergency lighting, everything bathed in dark red. Morrison's voice dropped to a near whisper. "We're being watched." Ramirez's hands hovered over the terminal. "Sir, if they're inside the system, they'll know we saw this." "They already do," Morrison said. Elena stood slowly, her reflection caught in the metal cabinet beside her. Eyes sharp, jaw set, that familiar posture returning like muscle memory. "Then I'll need my gear," she said. Morrison's eyes met hers, old soldier to soldier. "You sure you want to wake that part of yourself up again?" "It never really slept," she said. Outside, the night wind tore across the desert. carrying sand that hissed against the metal walls of the compound. The base siren didn't sound. No one knew anything yet. The rest of the soldiers slept under the illusion of safety, unaware that their peace had just ended. Inside the dim-lit command office, Morrison stood by the window, watching the stars fade behind dust clouds. 7 of them, always 7. He didn't turn when he spoke. They buried us once, Carter. They'll try again, but this time. She finished for him. They'll find out ghosts don't stay dead. A faint smile tugged at the edge of his mouth. Then let's remind them. Her eyes flicked toward the metal on her desk, still glinting faintly in the red light. Then she picked it up, closed her fist around it, and turned toward the door. No more silence, no more hiding. If the world wanted ghosts, then ghosts were exactly what they'd get. What happens when the ghosts come back to life, and the living pretend they never knew them? The night was red. Emergency lights pulsed in rhythmic silence, casting long shadows through the corridor outside the command office. The base wasn't officially under alert, but those who had served long enough could feel it, the subtle shift in air pressure before a storm. Elena walked beside Morrison, boots striking the concrete floor in perfect sync with his. No words, no wasted movements, only purpose. In her hand she still held the encrypted message. 7 words. If one star rises again, 2 will fall. 7 words and a promise. They turned into the secure operations wing, the one used only for high-clearance briefings. Ramirez followed close behind, carrying a portable data slate. His face was pale, eyes flicking nervously toward every camera dome in the ceiling. Inside, the room was empty except for a single digital map projected over the central table. Thin red lines traced communication links across the western United States, satellite feeds, relay towers, encryption nodes. "This is where it came from?" Morrison asked. "Yes, sir," Ramirez said quietly. "Origin masked through 6 dummy relays, but I backtraced the routing pattern. Whoever sent it knew exactly how to hide. They used a protocol that doesn't exist in any database except one." Morrison turned his head slightly. "Which one?" Ramirez hesitated. "Ghost 7's. The silence was immediate, heavy. Elena's jaw tightened. "That's not possible. That system was buried. Every relay, every black node, wiped when we disbanded." "I know," Ramirez said. "That's why it doesn't make sense." Morrison stared at the screen. The red lines flickered faintly, like veins pulsing across the digital map. "Someone still has access." Elena stepped closer, studying the coordinates. "Whoever it is, they're using our ghost net, the same secure mesh we used for field transmissions." "Which means," Morrison said, "it's someone who was on the inside." Her eyes lifted to meet his. "One of ours." The general didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, the way only someone who'd seen too many betrayals could look. "Pull the archive," he ordered Ramirez. "Every mission, every operator, I want names." "Sir, those files are sealed under triple-key encryption," Ramirez said carefully. "Even with your clearance, it'll trigger a silent alert." "Do it anyway," Morrison said. Ramirez nodded. "Yes, sir." The hours crawled. The power still flickered in intervals. Outside, the wind howled across the desert like an animal clawing at the fences. Inside, the command room glowed with data streams, and encrypted file logs slowly unraveling. Elena sat across from Morrison, sipping bitter coffee that had long gone cold. She didn't ask permission to stay. She was part of this now, and he knew it. "Ghost Unit 7 was supposed to be erased," Morrison said, his tone low, reflective. "We were told it was mercy. For your protection, they said, but I knew the truth. It was control." Elena nodded slowly. "They couldn't risk people knowing what we saw, what we did." He looked at her. "And what did we do, Carter?" She met his gaze. Her answer was quiet. "We made enemies, the kind that wear suits instead of uniforms." Morrison's eyes darkened. And now one of them wants to remind us that ghosts still bleed. At 02:13 hours, the system beeped softly. Ramirez looked up, startled. "I've got it," he said. "One operator key still active. Signature traces match Alpha 3 designation." Elena's head snapped up. "Alpha 3 is Marcus Webb," Morrison finished grimly. Her breath caught. "That's impossible. He's dead. Syria 2017, I know." The image of a man flickered onto the screen, classified personnel photo, black background, rank and call sign blurred. Sergeant Marcus Webb, Ghost Unit 7, Demolitions and Extraction Specialist, KIA. Except his encryption key was still active, sending outbound signals just 23 minutes ago. Elena leaned forward. Where was it transmitted from? Ramirez's fingers danced over the console. Coordinates 41.3 north, 114 west. That's. He looked up, disbelief etched across his face. That's 50 miles from here. Morrison exhaled slowly. Someone's playing a dangerous game. Or someone's alive who shouldn't be, Elena said. By morning, the base woke to routine. No one knew what had happened overnight. The mess hall buzzed with idle chatter again. Trucks rolled out for patrols. Soldiers trained under the harsh Nevada sun. But under the surface, a small classified operation had already begun, one known only to 3 people. Morrison, Elena, Ramirez. They moved quietly through the motor pool at dawn, loading a single unmarked vehicle. Inside, field comms, encrypted sat link, tactical gear stripped of insignia. No records, no manifest, no trace. As Morrison sealed the last crate, he said softly, "This isn't an order, Carter. You don't have to come." She checked her sidearm, holstered it, and met his eyes. "You know I do." He studied her for a moment, then nodded once. "Then we do this off the books. No command channels, no backup, ghost rules." Ramirez handed her a comms earpiece. "I'll keep the link silent unless things go sideways. If they do, I'll burn everything." "Understood," she said. The road stretched endless ahead of them, flat, sun-bleached asphalt cutting through desert emptiness. Morrison drove, eyes hidden behind dark lenses. Elena sat beside him, scanning the horizon. She'd been here before. Not this place, but this silence. The one that comes before truth, the kind that hums like a live wire. After an hour, Morrison spoke. "When we lost Webb, I never saw the body. They said there wasn't enough left to recover." Elena nodded slowly. "Same story for Chen, same for Okonkwo. Convenient, isn't it?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The GPS blinked as they neared the coordinates, an abandoned radar outpost from the Cold War era. Rusted fences, satellite dishes broken by wind. The kind of place where no one asked questions because no one cared. Morrison cut the engine. The desert went silent. They stepped out together, weapons low, scanning. The building's entrance hung open, just slightly. A shadow moved inside. Elena motioned 2 fingers. Morrison nodded. She went in first, back to the wall, clearing corners with the ease of someone who'd done this in too many places she'd never admit to being. The air smelled like dust and old metal. A faint hum came from deeper within. Then movement. "Elena." The voice froze her. It was rougher now, older, but familiar. She stepped forward, rifle raised. "Marcus." From the darkness, a figure emerged, unshaven, gaunt, eyes haunted but alive. "Marcus Webb." Every instinct screamed this couldn't be real. She didn't lower the weapon. "Prove it." He raised his left hand, revealing a tattoo, the same serpent but with 5 stars beneath it. Morrison's breath caught behind her. "It's really you." Webb looked at them both, eyes flicking between faces he hadn't seen in years. "I told you they'd come for us if anyone resurfaced. You should have stayed buried." "Who they?" Morrison asked. "The ones who built Ghost 7, Webb said quietly. The ones who profited from every operation we ran, then erased us when we started asking questions. Elena stepped closer. You faked your death. I didn't have a choice, he said. They killed Chen and Okonkwo when they tried to expose the Black Ledger. I barely got out. Morrison's voice hardened. What ledger? Webb hesitated, then pulled a small data drive from his jacket. The one that proves Ghost 7 wasn't just black ops, it was corporate. Contracted missions hidden behind patriotic speeches. We weren't rescuing hostages, General. We were cleaning up their mess. The room went still. Elena took the drive. It was cold, heavier than it should have been. Why send the message? Why now? Webb looked straight at her. Because they're coming for you next. Outside, the wind began to rise again, whipping sand through the open door. Elena looked toward the horizon, jaw set. For the first time in years, the ghosts weren't just memories. They were warnings. Morrison turned to Webb. If what you're saying is true, then we're already exposed. We are, Webb said. They've been watching you since the tribunal. You think that medal ceremony went unnoticed. The moment your sleeve rolled up, General, you told the world Ghost 7 wasn't dead. Elena's throat tightened. Then we finish what we started. Morrison's eyes met hers. You sure you're ready to disappear again? She looked at him steady. Maybe I never reappeared. As night fell, they sat around a small portable lantern in the ruins of the outpost. The wind howled outside. The air hummed with tension and old memories. Webb studied her quietly. You still run 5 kilometers every morning. She smiled faintly. 6 now. For a moment the ghosts weren't just shadows. They were family. Broken, scattered, but still alive in the same unspoken rhythm. Then Morrison broke the silence. Tomorrow we bring this to light. If there's proof, we find it. We expose the ledger, and this time they don't get to erase us. Elena nodded once, staring into the lantern's glow. But deep down she knew the truth. Exposure came with a price. And for ghosts like them, the bill always came due. What would you do if the truth you uncovered could destroy everything you ever fought for? The desert wind screamed through the abandoned radar station, rattling rusted doors like restless ghosts. Inside, the air was cold despite the heat outside, the kind of cold that came not from temperature, but from secrets buried too long. Elena sat by the dim lantern, eyes fixed on the small data drive lying between them on the table. It looked harmless, just a dull piece of metal and plastic, but everyone in that room knew it could burn the world down if opened in the wrong hands. General Morrison leaned against the wall, his weathered face lit in fragments by the flickering light. Webb sat across from Elena, silent, his fingers twitching as though they still remembered the habit of reloading weapons in the dark. Lieutenant Ramirez's voice crackled faintly through the comm's earpiece. Signal's weak, ma'am, but I'm still online. Whatever you do, don't connect that drive to base systems. It'll light up every red flag from here to DC. Copy that, Elena said softly. We'll handle it offline. Roger and Carter, Ramirez hesitated. Be careful. Someone scrubbed your personnel file last night. It's gone, all of it, even the backup archives. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. She just glanced at Morrison, who understood instantly. They were already erasing her again. The laptop Webb used was ancient, a hardened field terminal, disconnected from any live network, its screen flickering faintly as it powered up. He inserted the drive. A black interface appeared, coded strings scrolling too fast for the eye to follow. Then it stopped. One word blinked in the center. Echelon. Morrison frowned. That was our clearance tag during ghost operations, but we never saw it written like that. Webb nodded. Because it wasn't just a clearance tag, it was the company name. Elena's gaze sharpened. Company. Private defense contractors, Webb said. Hidden behind fake shell accounts. They sold our missions as packages, classified counterterrorism ops turned into for-profit campaigns. We weren't rescuing hostages. We were securing assets for the people who own the wars. The room went silent. Morrison's eyes darkened. You're saying we were working for corporations, not the government. Webb nodded once. Ghost Unit 7 wasn't under the Pentagon. It was subcontracted through Echelon Defense. Black budget, no oversight. We thought we were saving lives. In reality, we were protecting interests. Elena leaned back slowly, her pulse steady but her breath tight. How far does it go? Webb looked up, and the haunted look in his eyes told her everything. Farther than you want to know. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly outside the building, distant, deliberate. Elena froze. Her instincts kicked in immediately, rifle up, muzzle low. Morrison's hand went to his sidearm. Webb reached for his combat knife. 3 shadows moved along the perimeter, flashlights slicing through the night. Base patrol, Morrison whispered. Elena shook her head. Wrong formation, too quiet. They're tracking, not patrolling. They crouched in the darkness, the lantern extinguished with a soft click. The footsteps drew closer. A voice murmured through static, too faint to understand. Then a metallic click. Safety off. Morrison's voice dropped to a growl. Ambush. The first shot shattered the silence. A single suppressed round, whisper-soft but deadly. It hit the wall inches from Elena's head. She rolled behind cover, returning fire in precise, measured bursts. Webb flanked left, his movements instinctive, the way only those trained in covert ops could move. Morrison covered the rear, methodical and calm despite the chaos. It was over in 40 seconds, 3 assailants down, no insignia, no tags, no dog IDs, just black gear and clean weapons. Elena crouched over one of the bodies, pulling down the mask, a civilian face, clean cut, not insurgent, not mercenary. Who are they? She whispered. Webb's voice was cold. Echelon recovery team, they clean up loose ends. Morrison's jaw tightened, and now they know we're alive. By sunrise, the sky was burning gold. They buried the bodies under the sand, shallow graves that the desert wind would soon erase. No names, no markers. Webb watched in silence, his hands trembling. Every time we think we're done burying, the earth just opens up again. Morrison placed a hand on his shoulder. The only thing that matters is what we do next. Elena zipped the empty rifle bag closed. We finish it. We show the world what Echelon really is. Webb hesitated, and if they silence us first? She looked up at him. The same look she'd worn when she faced a firing squad of mockery and walked away without blinking. Then at least they'll know we didn't stay quiet. They drove east, toward an old satellite array that Morrison knew still had a direct uplink to the Department of Defense's shadow network. It was the only place they could transmit the data without interception. As the vehicle rattled over cracked asphalt, Morrison broke the silence. You know what'll happen if we send this? Elena nodded. They'll deny it, bury it again, maybe bury us with it. And you're still willing. She looked out the window at the endless desert, where heat waves danced like ghosts. I didn't survive all this to keep pretending the truth doesn't exist. At 08:40 hours they reached the array, a massive skeleton of steel towers and dead cables. The control room was still functional, barely. Webb began setting up the uplink. We'll need at least 7 minutes to push the data through the back channel. Once it's out, they can't stop it. Elena checked her rifle again, scanning the horizon. Her instincts prickled. We won't have 7 minutes. She was right. The first drone appeared over the ridge, silent, sleek, matte black. Its camera eye glinted once in the morning sun. Then another followed, and another. Ramirez's voice came through the comms, panicked. Carter, multiple contacts incoming. Echelon drones, pattern suggests precision strike. You need to get out now. Negative, she said. We finished the upload. Ma'am, you don't understand. Cut the link, Lieutenant. She removed her earpiece. The whine of approaching drones grew louder, circling like vultures. Webb typed furiously, 4% 915. Morrison moved to the window, rifle steady. They're targeting the antenna array. Elena took position beside him. Then we buy time. The first missile hit the outer tower, sending a shockwave through the ground. The structure groaned, metal screaming as it twisted. 40%, Webb shouted. Elena fired through the window, taking out the nearest drone. The explosion painted the sky with fragments of flame. Another followed, then another. The second blast threw Webb backward, smoke and dust filling the control room. Sparks danced across the equipment. Elena, Morrison's voice cut through the ringing in her ears. He's hit. She crawled through the smoke, pulling Webb back. Blood seeped through his sleeve, but he was still conscious. Barely. Keep it going, he whispered. Don't stop. She pressed her hand against the wound. You're not dying here. He gave a weak grin. Wouldn't be the first time. Morrison looked at the terminal. 92%, come on. The final drone dove straight toward them. Elena turned, raised her rifle, and fired. The bullet hit dead center. The explosion lit the sky like sunrise. Then silence. The upload completed with a single tone. Transmission successful. Elena exhaled, lowering her rifle. Morrison's eyes closed briefly in relief. You did it. Webb gave a pained chuckle. We did it. Elena squeezed his hand. Rest easy, Marcus. He smiled faintly, his breathing slowing. Tell Chen she was right about the tattoo. It wasn't about death. Her throat tightened. What was it about then? He looked at her, eyes soft, fatting. Rebirth. And then he was gone. The morning wind tore through the shattered array, scattering dust across the desert floor. Morrison stood beside her, his voice low. His signal's gone, but the message, it's out. Elena watched the horizon, jaw clenched. Then Echelon will come for both of us now. He nodded. Let them. The truth's already running faster than they can kill it. She knelt beside Webb's body, closing his eyes gently. The serpent tattoo on his arm caught the sunlight, the 5 stars beneath it glinting faintly. Her own mark burned beneath her sleeve, 3 stars. She whispered under her breath, 1 for each of you. When she rose, the wind carried her words away, but not her resolve. Far away, in a glass tower overlooking Washington, a man in a tailored suit stared at his monitor. The classified feed showed a static frame, the moment before the array exploded. He picked up the phone. Contain it, all of it. Sir, the file's already on the military network. Then make sure no one who sent it survives long enough to confirm it. He ended the call, staring out over the city. For the first time in his career, he felt something he didn't understand. Fear. Because ghosts don't stay buried. And this time, one of them had just come back to life. How long can you run from the shadows when you were the one who trained them to hunt? The explosion's echo still hung in the desert air hours later, rolling across miles of sand before dying into silence. The communications array was gone, just a smoking skeleton against the dawn. But the data, it was out. And for people like Elena Carter and General Morrison, that meant only one thing: time was running out. They drove back toward the base in an unmarked vehicle, the silence inside heavier than the dust outside. Morrison's hands gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles pale. Elena stared out the window, eyes scanning the horizon the way a soldier never stops doing. Every flash of sunlight on metal looked like a scope. Every dust trail looked like pursuit. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but certain. They'll call us traitors before they call us heroes. Morrison's reply was just as steady. They always do. By the time they reached the edge of the base perimeter, the alarms were already screaming. The main gates were sealed, security lights flooding the compound in harsh white. Soldiers moved fast but without understanding, confusion layered over command. Someone had already rewritten the story. Morrison pulled the truck into a side maintenance access point, flashing his ID. The scanner beeped once, then denied access. Authorization revoked, the console read. He tried again. Same result. They've burned us from the inside, Elena said, scanning the compound. We're locked out. He looked at her. Then we find another way in. They ditched the vehicle and moved on foot, sticking to shadows along the outer wall. Elena led the way. Her body moved automatically, silent steps, low profile, eyes always scanning. It wasn't training. It was muscle memory, sharpened by years of surviving places that didn't exist on any map. They reached the north maintenance hatch. Morrison punched in a series of codes, old ones from years before. The door unlocked with a quiet click. Inside, the hallway smelled like oil and metal. It was empty, eerily so. Where Ramirez? Elena asked. He should have been monitoring the feed. Either he's hiding, Morrison said, or they found him first. They moved quickly, each corridor feeling longer than it should. The hum of fluorescent lights echoed like distant whispers. Then a sound. A soft clatter. Elena froze, hand up. Morrison stopped behind her. Another sound, metal against tile. She stepped forward, rifle up. The door at the end of the corridor creaked open. Don't shoot, a voice called, trembling. It was Ramirez. His uniform was torn, blood streaked across his sleeve, but he was alive. Lieutenant, Morrison said, rushing forward. What happened? They came for me, Ramirez said, voice shaking. Men in black gear, no insignia. They knew exactly where to look. I wiped the network, but they were already inside the system. Elena's eyes narrowed. How many? 6, maybe more. I locked down the comms center before escaping through the maintenance ducts. Morrison looked toward Elena. We need that control room. It's the only way to see who's rewriting our files. Ramirez nodded weakly. They're running the network through a shadow server, call sign Iron Halo. It's deep. You'll need full bypass. Elena smiled faintly. Good thing I don't wait for permission. The control room sat buried beneath the main operations tower, guarded by 2 armed soldiers. Elena and Morrison approached through the ventilation shafts, a route she remembered from her early days at the base. Old habits, old ghosts. She motioned for Morrison to hold. He did. She dropped silently behind the guards, her movement swift as breath. 2 quick strikes, one to the throat, one to the jaw. Both men dropped without a sound. Morrison joined her. They entered. Inside the room was a wall of screens, each showing something different. Satellite feeds, personnel lists, encryption logs, but one feed froze them both. It was them. A live camera angle from the hallway they had just passed. The system was watching them in real time. They've been tracking us since we got back, Morrison muttered. Elena scanned the monitors. Look at this top channel encrypted relay. She tapped a few keys, decoding the stream. A voice filtered through, distorted and cold. Contain all unauthorized personnel. Use non-traceable engagement. Targets Morrison and Carter. She recognized the tone, smooth, bureaucratic, familiar. It was the same voice she'd heard years ago during debriefings for missions that never existed. Morrison's jaw tightened. Director Vaughn. Echelon's public face. The man who spoke to the cameras about patriotism while his companies funded wars in secret. Elena looked at the monitor, voice low. He's not sending hit teams anymore. He's coming himself. Outside, thunder rolled across the desert, not weather but sound. Helicopters, 2 of them approaching fast. Extraction, Morrison said. They're coming to clean house. Elena moved to the console. We can't stop them, but we can leave something behind. She started typing, fingers flying across the keys. Morrison glanced at her. What are you doing? Insurance. She uploaded the last fragments of Ghost Unit data, the kind too encrypted to be deleted quickly, into every open defense network node she could reach. She didn't need them to believe it. She just needed them to see it. Vaughn couldn't erase what everyone had already touched. The first blast hit the upper floor. Dust rained from the ceiling. Sirens wailed. Morrison grabbed her arm. We need to go now. Elena pulled the final drive from the console. Got it. They ran through the sub-corridors as the sound of rotor blades grew louder overhead. Outside, chaos. Soldiers scrambled in confusion as the helicopters descended. Black-suited operators poured out, moving in coordinated precision. They weren't here for control, they were here for execution. Morrison fired first, dropping two before they even saw him. Elena covered the flank, her shots controlled, clean. The air was filled with gunfire and grit. Ramirez stumbled behind them, wounded but determined. There's too many. Elena grabbed his vest, pulling him toward a maintenance truck. Move. They climbed in. Morrison hit the ignition, tires screaming as the vehicle tore across the yard. Bullets struck the metal hull, sparks flaring. From the helicopter, a voice boomed through a loudspeaker. Surrender now, and no further force will be used. Morrison shouted back, you first. He rammed the truck through the outer fence. Metal screamed. The vehicle broke free, crashing into the open desert. Behind them, the base burned. They drove until night swallowed the horizon again. The desert was endless, empty, merciless. The headlights cut a thin path through dust and memory. Ramirez's breathing was shallow. He was losing blood. Elena pressed gauze against his wound, her hands steady. Stay with me, Lieutenant, she whispered. He gave a weak grin. You don't take orders well, do you? She smiled faintly. Never have. Morrison's eyes stayed on the road. We can't go to any base. Every system's compromised. They'll call us fugitives. Then we become what they already think we are, Elena said quietly. Ghosts. He looked at her, and then what? We find Vaughn, she said, and make him answer for what he built. Morrison nodded slowly. You realize that's suicide. Maybe, she said, but silence already killed enough of us. By dawn, they stopped at an old fueling station long abandoned by the highway. The paint peeled from its sign. The glass was shattered. Inside, dust coated everything. Morrison patched Ramirez's arm while Elena stood by the window, scanning the horizon. For the first time since the firefight, she allowed herself to breathe, but even that felt heavy. You ever think, she said softly, that maybe we were never heroes, just pieces moved around by people who knew which buttons to push? Morrison didn't look up. Heroes are a luxury for people who never had to choose between conscience and command. She turned toward him. And what are we? He met her eyes, the ones who stopped choosing and started surviving. Later that night, Elena sat alone outside the gas station, under a sky littered with stars. For the first time, she counted them. 7. Always 7. She rolled up her sleeve and traced the faded stars beneath the serpent on her arm. 3. Marcus Webb had 5. Morrison had 7. She wondered what that meant now, if the stars were still symbols of missions completed or simply marks of people lost. In the distance, faint lights appeared on the horizon, vehicles. She didn't wake the others yet, she just watched, calm, focused, ready. Because no matter how many times they tried to erase her, to bury the truth, or to silence the ghosts, she was still here. Still watching. Still standing. And for the first time, she wasn't running from her past. She was walking straight back into it. How far would you go to expose the truth, if the truth was built from your own silence? The desert bled into dawn again, stretching endlessly across the horizon. The wind carried sand that hissed against the metal shell of the abandoned gas station like a whisper of unfinished stories. Inside, 3 figures rested, or pretended to. Morrison sat slouched against the wall, one hand still gripping his sidearm even in sleep. Lieutenant Ramirez lay across 2 rusted chairs, his breathing shallow but steady. Elena Carter sat by the doorway, her rifle across her knees, eyes fixed on the horizon. She hadn't slept. Not since the array, not since Marcus Webb's last words, Rebirth. It haunted her not because she didn't believe it, but because part of her still didn't know what she was being reborn into. A soldier again, a fugitive, a ghost resurrected for one last fight. The faint rumble of engines in the distance pulled her out of her thoughts. She stood, moving to the edge of the broken window. 3 vehicles, black, sleek, civilian models with government plates. "They found us," she whispered. Morrison's eyes opened instantly. Ramirez stirred with a groan. "They moved faster than I thought," Morrison muttered, loading a fresh magazine into his pistol. "We can't fight them here." Elena's voice stayed calm. "Then we take the fight to them." 10 minutes later, the 3 of them were back on the road. The stolen truck grinding across gravel and sand, its engine roaring like a beast that refused to die. Elena sat in the passenger seat, eyes on the map spread across her lap. Vaughn's headquarters is in Arlington, Virginia, Echelon Defense Front Office, but he won't be there. He'll be hiding in one of the private command facilities he built for continuity of operations. Morrison nodded. "The Safe House Network." She pointed to a location circled in red ink on the map. "Facility 43, Nevada Highlands. It's where Ghost Unit 7 was first formed. If he's paranoid enough, and he is, he'll go back to the beginning." Morrison gave a faint smirk. Always ironic how the architects of shadows think history can't find them there. They drove through the day in silence, stopping only to refuel from abandoned depots. Ramirez patched his arm with rough stitches, grimacing through pain but refusing to rest. When night fell again, they saw it, a faint glimmer of light against the mountain range. High walls, floodlights, motion sensors. The same facility Elena remembered from nearly a decade ago. The place where she'd become invisible. They parked the truck a mile out, hidden behind a ridge of jagged rock. Elena crouched beside Morrison, studying the layout through binoculars. Main access road is fortified, 2 guard towers, infrared grid on the perimeter, automated turrets still active. "Entrance?" Morrison asked. "There's a maintenance shaft behind the west slope. We used it for infiltration drills in 2017. He looked at her, "Still remember the code?" Her mouth curved in a faint smile. "I wrote the code." They moved under cover of darkness, silent, fluid, familiar. The closer they got, the heavier the air felt, like the ground itself remembered what it was built to hide. The shaft door was still there, half buried in sand. Elena brushed it off, exposing the keypad beneath. The old screen flickered to life. "Access code," it demanded in sterile blue letters. Her fingers hesitated just once before typing, 77321. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the lock released with a quiet click. The past had just let her in again. Inside, the tunnel smelled the same, recycled air and cold metal. Every echo of their footsteps sounded like ghosts walking beside them. Morrison moved ahead, flashlight steady. "This place shouldn't exist anymore." "It doesn't," Elena said, "not on paper." The corridors opened into the old training hall. Dust floated through shafts of dim light. The target dummies were still standing, riddled with bullet holes. A few old helmets lay scattered on the floor, abandoned after the last session. Elena stopped in the center of the room. "This is where Webb taught me how to clear a corridor without thinking." Morrison nodded. "He was the best I ever saw." She looked around slowly. They erased everything but not this. A faint hum drew her attention to the far wall. A power line still glowed. Someone had restored power to part of the facility. She raised her weapon. "We're not alone." The voice that answered came from the shadows, calm, cold. "Of course you're not." Director Vaughn stepped into the light, his tailored suit uncreased despite the dust, his expression one of quiet triumph. Two black-clad operatives flanked him, weapons ready. "Elena Carter," he said softly, "the woman who won't stay dead." She didn't lower her rifle. "And you're the man who sells wars like stock options." He smiled faintly. "You and your idealism. I suppose that's why Morrison always liked you. You still believe wars are about right and wrong." Morrison's voice was low, dangerous. "They used to be." "Used to be," Vaughn repeated, "until people like you forgot that wars are about survival, funding, control, influence. We didn't erase Ghost Unit 7. We evolved it." He gestured toward the far wall, where a massive screen flickered to life. Surveillance footage, mission feeds, tactical overlays. Dozens of black operations scrolling across the display, all under the Ghost Unit designation. Only now they were unmanned, automated, drones, artificial soldiers, ghosts without souls. Elena's stomach turned. "You turned us into code." Vaughn's smile sharpened. "I made you eternal. No politics, no fear, just perfect obedience. The data you uploaded only proved how effective the original design was." She took a step forward. "You killed them, Chen, Okonkwo, Webb, you killed them to build this." "I repurposed their legacy," Vaughn corrected. "Sacrifice must mean something." Elena's voice broke into steel. "It meant something before you stole it." He tilted his head. "You think you've won, don't you? That little transmission stunt. The file's already buried under classification. By next week you'll be a myth again." "Then maybe myth is enough," Morrison said. Vaughn turned toward him, amused. "You're too old for rebellion, General. The world doesn't want heroes anymore. It wants efficiency." Elena raised her weapon. "Then it can start being efficient about losing you." The air snapped, 2 gunshots. Her rifle barrel smoked. One of Vaughn's guards fell instantly. The second lunged forward. Morrison dropped him with a single, precise shot. Vaughn stumbled back, fear cracking his composure for the first time. "You wouldn't dare." Elena stepped closer, her voice quiet. "Try me." He laughed nervously. "If you kill me, 100 more take my place. You can't stop a machine with conscience. You can't silence an empire built on data." She lowered her gun slightly. "You're right." Then she tossed the drive toward him. It hit the floor at his feet. "What's that?" he demanded. "Everything you built," she said. "Every mission, every death, every dollar, the same data you tried to erase, I copied it." His eyes widened. "You can kill me," she continued, "but it's already on every defense network in the country. You'll spend the rest of your life running from the truth you made." Vaughn's voice trembled. "You think they'll believe you?" "No," she said, "but they'll start asking." Morrison's voice cut through the silence. "And once people start asking, they stop obeying." The director's composure broke completely. "You don't understand the scale of what you're—" He never finished. The blast came from behind him. A pressure charge Webb had set years ago as part of the facility's fail-safe. The wall erupted in light and sound. Elena and Morrison dove for cover as fire, and dust swallowed the room. When the noise faded, Vaughn was gone, buried beneath his own creation. They emerged into the cold morning air, coughing, covered in ash. The facility behind them burned, sending black smoke twisting into the sky. Morrison turned to her. "He's finished." Elena watched the smoke rise. "No, he's just proof." He frowned. "Of what?" "That you can't kill something that feeds on silence. You can only make noise loud enough to wake the world." They drove until the facility was a dark blur behind them. Ramirez, pale but conscious, sat in the back, eyes wide. "You did it." Elena nodded faintly. We ended one chapter. The next one starts without us. Morrison looked at her across the dashboard. Where will you go? She smiled, weary but sure. Somewhere quiet, somewhere they'll never think to look for ghosts. He chuckled softly. You've earned the silence this time. She looked out the window, her reflection fading against the sunlight. No, this time I'll decide what silence means. That night under another endless Nevada sky, Elena buried the last of the ghost insignias beside a rusted fence post. No names, no graves, just the serpent symbol carved into metal. 7 stars above it. She stood for a long moment, the wind tugging at her hair, the desert stretching infinite around her. When she finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. For every invisible soldier who was told to disappear, this is your proof that you existed. And for the first time she smiled, not because she won, but because she finally stopped hiding from who she was. How do you live again after the war has erased your name? Weeks passed. Enough time for the fires in the Nevada highlands to burn out, for the smoke to drift east, and for silence to reclaim what explosions had once taken. The wreckage of Facility 43 was just twisted steel and black ash now, guarded by no one, remembered by few. But silence, Elena Carter had learned, was never the same as peace. She drove an old pickup with no plates and a cracked windshield, through towns that didn't ask questions and deserts that never answered them. Somewhere along the way, General Howard Morrison had taken another road, heading toward Washington with evidence only he could carry. They hadn't said goodbye exactly. Soldiers never really did. They just looked at each other across the dust and known their paths had split. Now it was just her, the open road, and the ghosts riding shotgun. She reached the outskirts of a forgotten town, a scattering of gas pumps, a diner that still played 80s country through crackling speakers, and a chapel too small for sermons. She stopped outside, stepping into heat that shimmered off the asphalt. The chapel door creaked open when she pushed it. Inside, the air was cool, still scented faintly of candle wax and old wood. The stained glass window cast fractured colors across the floor. She sat in the back pew and unrolled a faded piece of cloth, the ghost unit patch she'd cut from her uniform before it was confiscated. The serpent swallowing its tail, 7 stars. The ink had bled, but the meaning hadn't. She whispered the names like a prayer. Marcus Webb, Sarah Chen, David Okonkwo, Mason Reed, Ana Delgado, Isaac Rains. Her fingers paused on the last one. Elena Carter, she murmured finally, KIA 2017. The irony stung. She buried herself once to keep the truth alive. Now she carried that burial like armor. Outside, thunder rumbled distant, rolling almost like engines. For a second her body tensed, reflex, not fear. Then she saw only storm clouds gathering far out over the horizon. No pursuit this time. She exhaled slowly, and for the first time in years, the breath didn't taste like duty. When she left the chapel, she stopped at the small diner across the road. The waitress looked up, startled by the sight of a woman in worn tactical boots and a faded jacket bearing no insignia. Coffee? The waitress asked. Please, Elena said. She sat by the window, watching dust swirl outside. The local radio played softly, news headlines blending with static. Sources inside the Department of Defense deny the existence of any covert program called Ghost Unit 7. Elena smiled faintly. Of course they do. The waitress poured her coffee. You one of those vets passing through? Elena nodded, something like that. Well, the woman said kindly, whatever you did out there, thank you. Elena met her eyes. You wouldn't say that if you knew. The waitress tilted her head. Doesn't matter. Somebody's got to carry the weight so the rest of us can sleep. For the first time, Elena had no reply. She left a few bills on the counter and stepped back into the sun. The wind tugged at her jacket, and for a moment she thought she heard Marcus Webb's voice again. Rebirth. Maybe he'd been right. Maybe this was what it looked like. That night, miles away, General Morrison stood in front of a Senate subcommittee room he wasn't supposed to be in. His uniform was immaculate, his expression unreadable. He placed a small flash drive on the table. "This," he said, "contains evidence of operations conducted outside lawful oversight, hundreds of missions, billions in untraceable contracts, and the names of every soldier sacrificed to keep it secret." A senator leaned forward. "General, you're accusing defense contractors of treason." "I'm accusing them of forgetting what the uniform stands for," Morrison said quietly. The room erupted in murmurs, cameras flashed, reporters scribbled. And somewhere in a small Nevada diner, Elena's phone buzzed once. A secure ping, no message attached. She didn't open it, she didn't need to. She knew what it meant. The world had finally heard the whisper. Days turned into weeks. The news spread in fragments, leaked reports, anonymous statements, words like echelon and unacknowledged operations appearing on scrolling tickers before vanishing again. Some called it a hoax, others called it treason. But quietly, people began asking questions. In training bases across the country, new recruits whispered about a woman with a tattoo of a serpent and stars, someone who'd stood her ground when everyone else bowed. Some said she'd vanished into the desert. Others claimed she was still in uniform, hidden among them, watching. Stories grow differently when they belong to ghosts. Elena eventually found herself standing at the edge of an unmarked cemetery in New Mexico. The graves were simple stones, no ranks, no units, just initials. She knew the pattern. She'd helped bury some of them. The wind moved through dry grass, whispering over the markers like a roll call. She knelt, setting the ghost patch against one of the stones. "You were never forgotten," she said softly. "They just tried to pretend you never were." Behind her, footsteps approached. Morrison's voice, low but steady, "Couldn't let you do the last one alone." She turned, surprised. "You made it through." He nodded, smiling faintly. "They tried to bury me in hearings and paperwork. Turns out ghosts aren't great at sitting still." She laughed, quiet and real. "You always said a clean conscience was bad for survival." He shrugged. "Maybe I finally wanted to see what peace looks like." They stood there in silence, side by side, watching the sunset stain the desert red and gold. After a while, Morrison said, "You ever think about going back, rejoining?" She shook her head. "I think I've done enough serving." "Then what now?" Elena looked toward the horizon, where the last light of day met the dark. "I don't know. Maybe I just keep running until it feels like I'm choosing to." He smiled. "That's as good a mission as any." When the night deepened, she lit a small fire near the graves. The flames flickered, painting the stars above in trembling light. She rolled up her sleeve and traced the serpent inked into her skin. The 3 stars beneath, it glowed faintly in the firelight. "One for Webb. One for Chen. One for Akinquo." She added a small mark beside them with the edge of a knife, carving into the skin just enough to leave a scar. "The 4th star. Rebirth," she whispered. It wasn't about defiance anymore. It wasn't about proving herself to anyone. It was simply acknowledgment that the ghosts inside her weren't gone. They had just found new forms. Somewhere far above, satellites passed silently across the black sky, invisible eyes that once served men like Vaughn. Now they watched a different kind of soldier, one who didn't answer to anyone, one who carried the weight of every unseen name. Elena poured sand over the dying fire and looked toward the horizon one last time. In the quiet, her voice came out like a vow. "For every forgotten warrior. For every scar that never made it into the record. For every woman or man who carried duty past the point of return. You are not gone. You are simply unseen." She turned away, walking into the desert until the night swallowed her shape. And when the wind rose again, it carried with it the faintest echo, not of gunfire or commands, but of a heartbeat. Steady, enduring, alive. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.